Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I rise to support this bill, the Financial Services Providers Pre-Implementation Adjustments Bill. And, you know, the thoughts of both the Minister and the Chairman of our committee have been expressed. It is about the efficiency of our financial markets. We have, in the past year and a half, suffered turmoil, like most countries around the world, in both goods and services markets, but particularly financial markets, Mr Speaker. And this bill does go some way to addressing some of the concerns around public confidence in the financial industry. Mr Speaker, it is some of the key changes, as has been pointed out by the two prior speakers, are really around the qualifying entity model and how these entities are regulated by the Securities Commission first and foremost to take responsibility for advice provided by employees and contractors on a limited or extended range of products instead of those people who require individual licences to give such advice. Now, the key changes, as have been pointed out, are really around naming individual contractors who provide such advice to take responsibility for, instead of automatically being responsible for advice from all contractors. I think that's particularly important, and it allows a degree of disclosure by these entities who provide advice. It allows investors and consumers alike to understand who is providing the advice and their responsibilities from providing such advice. It also allows these entities, employees and named contractors to provide what are called advice on Category 1 products. And these are complex products such as shares and various other instruments and financial products without being individually licensed. And currently, under the current legislation, of course, Mr Speaker, this is permitted only for the employees of those qualifying financial entities. Mr Speaker, you know, these reforms, this particular piece of legislation is part of a suite of reforms that were aimed at promoting confidence in the financial sector and included the Financial Advisors Act, Financial Services Providers Act, as well as the Reserve Bank Amendment Act of 2008. And of course some of that legislation was passed by the last government, and the chair of our committee was of course the Minister at the time, and we're continuing on a lot of the bipartisan attitudes to this particular part of our laws, and it's encouraging to hear from the Chairman tonight that she will be working constructively across party lines, of course, with our ACT and Māori Party members on the committee to ensure that this piece of legislation is on time and facilitates the purpose under which we are intending to put it forward. Mr Speaker, it's really critical that we go online in the middle of the year in terms of the register of financial service providers, and compliance is compulsory by early December. That goes without saying. Mr Speaker, we're going to welcome submissions by all stakeholders across the industry, not just providers of financial advice, but also consumers and those investors who have been hurt by some of the finance company failures that have occurred in the last 2 to 3 years. And if you're wondering whether there is a problem in the industry, Mr Speaker, you only have to look at the Consumer Magazine article last year, which outlined a mystery shopping expedition by the magazine and found a number of key areas in the financial services advisors industry which were particularly lacking. They included things like lack of advice, poor analysis by certain advisors, inappropriate advice, and questions around some of the costings provided by those advisors. So, Mr Speaker, it's really about improving standards of disclosure. which will ensure that consumers are better placed to assess the extent of the advisor's independence. And I think that is a critical point that's certainly come through in our finance company inquiry within the Commerce Select Committee. And the regime will also ensure that advisors meet minimum standards of competency and to ensure that they're able to provide the high quality advice that investors expect. But Mr. Speaker, we all know that you can't necessarily legislate for ethics and a certain competence and standard of behaviour, but we will certainly look at a regime which is regulated by the Securities Commission, and I obviously support this to the Select Committee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.